Good evening and welcome to the Job Search Solution radio program where we talk about looking for a job, jobs, changing careers, hiring. And as always, we begin with a prayer. Dear God, grant us thy peace and thy mercy, thy will be done. And in just a few minutes, Rich Savitsky is going to be with us talking about consultants in the workplace and some of the things that are happening. First of the year, as always, Rich has some great topics to speak about. Lately, we've been spending 10 seconds um, being grateful. So think of 3 things today that you are grateful for. Go. I recommend being grateful 3 times a day because you can't be unhappy when you're grateful. It's just no way. An attitude of gratitude. I wanted to discuss a topic, something that happened last week uh, between Christmas and New Year's. That was very important, that almost stood in the way of a guy getting a job. It had to do with references. We worked with a client that called us needing to hire a person. His human resources department or human roadblock department, depending on how you deal with it, how you see it, had been working on this thing for about 7 months and hadn't been able to find a candidate. They gave us 2 weeks. We found a perfect candidate for him, or as good as they were going to find. And they needed to hire the person and have him or her start by the first of the year. So they did this the week before Christmas. They found the person that they were ready to look for, the kind of person they wanted to find, and they got all ready to hire him. And they were getting all the paperwork and everything squared away for him to start the first of the year. And all of a sudden, the human resources department, which wasn't very happy about this whole thing because they'd been looking for 7 or 8 months and weren't able to find anybody, came up with the demand that they had to find 3 references for the guy. Well, he had 3 references, but he hadn't talked to 3 references in months. He didn't even know if he could find the references in the time that he needed to do that, in the time that he needed to start the job the first of the year. So the management that was trying to hire him wasn't happy about the thing. This was the first they had been reminded of it by the Human Resources Department. And the Human Resources Department was just trying to put their finger in the pie to make sure they got their way. They weren't happy about the whole process anyhow, because they had been unable to find the guy. And so, but part of their policy was they had to check through references. So the candidate went to find the 3 references. He couldn't find one guy at all. He didn't even know where he was working now. This was bad part on his part. I'll get to that in a minute. He got the voicemail of the 2 other references that he had and found one of them fairly quickly. Couldn't find the other one. Ended up having to find 2 more references. It took a week, almost a week to do that. Now, keep in mind, this is the week between Christmas and New Year's. He's scrambling to find these references. He never did find the 3rd one. He made a deal with the company. The hiring manager made a deal with the HR department that they would check the 3rd reference after he had started, provided it was all right, he would continue employment. Of course he would. And the whole thing was a mess. It just was kind of a debacle. And the human resources department was threatening to just hold up the hiring totally because they couldn't get 3 references. They could find 2, but they couldn't get 3. It was truly a human roadblock department. We ended up finding a 3rd reference after the first of the year on Monday, and everything was fine. The guy's references were impeccable anyhow. You could tell by the guy's background and where he had worked before that he was going to have good references, but it just wound up being a real pain. And it was a conflict between the human resources department and the department that the guy was going to work for. And it was a bit of a touch and go mess there for a while. First of all, the lesson is always have your references ready. Even if it's Christmas time, be ready for something that you're not going to expect if you're interviewing and looking for a job. If you're ready for a position, looking for a position, you need to touch bases with your references every once in a while to make sure that they're in the queue for you, and remind them, as I've said before, remind your references what kind of job you're looking at, who's going to be checking them, and everything that's involved. It wasn't almost a disaster, but it was a mess. And it was rounded up being a problem that shouldn't have been created. Have those references ready, let them know what's going on, even if it's Christmas time. Little things can mess things up. You never know how they're going to go. And little things like that could derail a perfectly good situation, which this was. So remember, little things can make a difference. All right, we're going to take a short break. Stay tuned. This is Tony Beshara with the Job Search Solution.